Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Today I am making 3 gel printed Christmas tree cards. I'm starting out with this beautiful acrylic paint by Reeves in a colour called Viridian. And it's a beautiful, rich green. So I'm using a grevillea leaf. This is just out of my garden. And there are plenty of leaves out there that will give you this sort of tree shape. And I've put it spine side down on my gel plate. And I'm bringing in a sheet of Glad Bake baking paper. And I'm using this to pull the print. I'm getting right into the edges with my fingers, smoothing out the wrinkles, giving it a nice massage, and let's see what we've got. So there's my first Christmas tree. And I will be collaging this to the front of one of the cards. Now I'm going to clean up my plate with a baby wipe and a damp cloth. The paper I'm using for all 3 cards is Canson XL watercolour. I'm taking one of these sheets, cutting it in half and scoring it down the middle, and then stamping the inside with a stamp. This Merry Christmas stamp is from Stampin' Up. It's quite an old set, but any Christmas greeting would work for this. I've put mine into my stamp positioner. And you can see how one of those sheets cut in half works perfectly to produce 2 cards. Just score them down the centre line. The ink that I like to use is VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigment ink. And once it's dry, it's waterproof. The reason I like to use a stamp positioner for this is because with watercolour paper, you need to give it a little extra love. You might have to stamp it more than once to get a really clear impression. And in fact, I'll stamp this twice. And you'll need to give this some time to dry, so leave it open. And I'm going to stamp all 3 of these at once, but you don't want to touch that until it's completely dry. I'm rolling out some more Viridian acrylic paint for the next card. And this card I'm going to pull directly from the plate using the card. And I'll show you how I do that. So placing down the leaf. And I've put some baking paper in between the card because we'll be pressing very hard. And I don't want to transfer any of that ink from the greeting onto the front of the card. I'm also using newsprint to protect the back while I use my Baren. And this keeps the back of the card completely clean. Make sure your hands are clean before you do this too. Keep an eye on any paint that's landed on your hands or fingers. Clean it up. Now I'm going to use a paintbrush and clean up the edges that have been missed. I wish that I had rolled this acrylic paint out a little bit larger, but we have what we have. Now I'm going to add some detail into the tree, and I'm just going to do with this some very sketchy lines, just nothing fancy here, just to give the impression that it's a tree. I plan on decorating this with some gold paint. So I just need the suggestion of branches and maybe a trunk coming down. So this is quite simple to do. And I've just taken the paint directly from the Brayer. Just picking up a bit more paint and now add in some wavy lines. I don't want this to look too perfect. I'll be decorating it later. Now I'm going to wash my hands in warm water and use a damp cloth. Now I'm wishing, yes, that I had rolled this out a bit bigger. It would make it easier for me. What I am going to do is I'm going to create some grass just by rolling in an edge like this. And the idea is that this tree will be sitting in a meadow. Putting some baking paper in between my card so I won't transfer that black ink onto the card front. Grabbing the newsprint and my Baren. And again, this will be pulling directly from the plate to the front of the card. And this is really interesting, this one. It has some fantastic texture. Really cool. I really like this one. So I've let this one dry. This is the very first one we did on the baking paper sheet. And I'm going to show you how I collage this to a card. Here are the other two. They've dried now, so I can handle them. And I'm going to get my blank card front, which I've stamped the greeting on the inside of, and some rice glue. This is Yamato Japanese rice glue. It is my favourite glue for any collage work that I do. It's archival and it's invisible once it's dry. I might make some small changes just to the branches, but here's my blank card and I'm going to show you how to collage using this beautiful Yamato rice glue. And you can buy this from Amazon or from the art supplies store. I have this lovely brush which is so soft and perfect for any glue application. I'm going to take a little bit of glue and just squeeze some directly onto the card front. Just a small amount. And I'm going to grab some clear water and wet my brush, just so that it's damp. And this will help the glue spread. And it goes on so smoothly. It goes on like butter. I love working with this glue. Now I have a paper towel underneath me which will absorb any that comes off the sides. And I'm trying not to move my card because I don't want any glue on the back of the card, just on the front. Now, rather than try and place it on the front of the card and guess where it's going to land, it's easier if you turn it over and use the back as your guide and then place your card face down on the back of the image. Give it a bit of a press. And I'm using a weight, an acrylic block, or you could put a book on it. And I'm just going to set that aside for a good hour. I went away and had some lunch and came back and it's completely dry. So now I can trim it. And I'm just going to start with some quite large scissors. You can see there's a few little white spots around there that I'll need to clean up with my paintbrush and a little bit of green paint, but we can do that later. I just want to get this attached to the front. And I'm using quite a large pair of scissors for the first round, and then I'll come in with some precision scissors and trim off any small slivers that need to be trimmed. But I'm being quite careful and cutting nice and straight. And it's interesting how this baking paper has a real plastic feel to the outside of it. It's almost feels like vinyl on the front of the card. It's really interesting and fun to work with. And it gives really cool textures too. It's got a lot of lovely texture around the exterior part of the tree, and then it's almost like got an aura around the tree. And I love how this one turned out. I really like them all. I think they all have their own charm. But the feel of this is quite interesting on the front of the card. It has just that lovely waxy, plasticky feel on the paper. So I'm going to use the same technique I used with the other one just to clean it up. If I had rolled out more of this paint, I wouldn't have had this problem. So next time I do it, I'll be rolling out a bigger piece. I also want to add a little detail to that area where the leaves have overlapped. So I'm just going to squeeze a small amount of that paint into a palette, and I have a really small precision brush. It's really tiny, and I'm just going to add some water and pull out some of that acrylic paint, and I'm going to create some shapes. So a tree is not a combination of trunk and branches and lots of leaves. It's actually shapes against the light. So I'm bringing the light back through these branches by putting in some shapes. I'm not trying to replicate anything that looks like a limb or a branch. I'm just bringing in some more of the light shining through the tree just by doing some really simple shapes. You can see how that gives a really subtle effect. Nice and simple. All right, let's clean up these edges. And I'm using kind of a rough technique here because the front of this is quite rough. I don't want to add sort of smooth paint on this. I'm doing a bit of cross-hatching there to get a rougher looking design rather than flat paint. I'm trying to match the texture that's on the card from the printing process. And that looks pretty good. And this will need a short amount of time to dry. And the others have dried as well. So I'm going to add some gold baubles to this tree. And to do that, I'm going to use IKEA Kids Gold Paint. I've also got some Nuvo drops that I thought I might have used. Love that diamond on the top. So if you had gold stickles or any sort of gold puffy paint, that would be good too. But this Kids IKEA paint I love. It has a nozzle tip the same as the Nuvo drops and the stickles. So it's quite a precision tool. You can just squeeze out a small amount and you get these lovely circles. It's quite hot here today in Sydney and the paint is running very fast. So I have to keep cleaning it off so that it doesn't drip. And I think there are a few little drips happening here or there, so I'll have to go and clean those up with that precision paintbrush at the end. But these do look like golden baubles on the tree. And the metallic paint gives it a real sheen. Now I'm going to make sure I draw this flat so that the baubles stay rounded. And I've just got the edge of the block sitting on it so that the card front will stay flat. Just cleaning up a little bit there, and here they are finished. So there's my 3 gel printed Christmas tree cards. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today and learned something. I'm really happy with how all of the cards turned out. I think they all have their own charm and appeal. Thanks for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.